The system window reveals that the elves of the Everglow Forest, who had not engaged in contracts with other tribes for 500 years, have now signed a business agreement with the humans of the Frontera barony. Javier reflects on the simplicity of solving problems with beef and questions his own necessity in the situation. They proceed to the town. An individual spots Lloyd Frontera and inquires about his identity. Another person explains that he previously convinced the orcs, and now the elves are on board. There's speculation that, at this rate, he might even bring dragons here. The skeptical person questions how he could achieve such a feat. Muera contemplates the prevalence of items made from harming plants, finding it cruel now that she sees it up front. Lloyd Frontera points out the diverse values held by different tribes, races, regions, and small organizations. He emphasizes that cooperation entails compromising on some of those values, and he believes that's where a world benefiting everyone begins. Muera acknowledges understanding this concept intellectually, but expresses hesitation in her heart. Lloyd Frontera agrees, stating that she'll need time, and encourages her to contemplate it slowly while enjoying some beef. She agrees, noting that she thinks she understands it now. After a while, Lloyd Frontera is at the construction site, contemplating the ongoing construction of Honey apartment buildings 101 and 102. One of the concerns he had before leaving for the Everglow Forest was whether these two buildings would be completed before the temperature dropped to sub-zero and the freeze-thawing phenomenon occurred. He reflects on the potential issue of water in the concrete freezing during sub-zero temperatures, leading to melting later, likely when winter is over, and if this occurs, the numerous water droplets inside the concrete could become impurities, resulting in a disaster. He notes that he no longer needs to worry about that now. The elves are efficiently working on the construction site, and Muir suggests finishing the work quickly and enjoying some beef. The others agree in unison. Lloyd Frontera explains that the construction progressed at a much faster pace than expected, thanks to the elves' crazy speed and mobility. Consequently, the first snow of winter marks the completion of Honey apartment buildings 100 and 102. He reflects on beta testing these two buildings throughout winter, aiming to have them ready to accommodate everyone by the next autumn. The crux of the beta test lies in the adiabatic material made from Alencia essence and soybean oil in a 1:100 ratio. A worker paints the pipe, while another reports the completion of installing insulation pipes from floors 1 to 8. Lloyd Frontera approves, instructing them to go down and start up the boiler. The boiler is started, and they all sit inside, experiencing a sense of relaxation. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges it as a great success and instructs everyone to prepare for moving people in. Javier begins to discuss the priority for moving in, but Lloyd Frontera interrupts, mentioning the ongoing snowfall and his current busy state. He decides to talk later and calls Sir Bairn. Lloyd Frontera conveys to Bairn that the priority for moving in should be families with children, followed by the elderly and the sickly. Within these categories, further priority should be given based on their health conditions. Bairn confirms his understanding. Lloyd Frontera adds that those unable to move will be accommodated in the single ondals that were built, emphasizing the importance of ensuring no one goes hungry or cold. He believes that only then will they owe them a significant favor, making it easier to engage them in work. Lloyd Frontera moves with Javier, holding his shovel, and suggests visiting the Baron, as there is still more work to be done in winter. Javier finds him annoying and contemplates hitting him. As he reflects, he realizes that Lloyd Frontera has been acting this way since the day his personality changed, and he can no longer dislike him. He recalls that Lloyd Frontera has even managed to get everyone around him to rely on him. Lloyd Frontera, hearing a trumpet sound, asks if it is not the Empress's royal messenger. His response confirms that it is indeed the Empress's royal messenger. Meanwhile, the royal messenger arrives and Erox Frontera and Marbella Frontera kneel down in front of him. He opens a scroll and expresses amazement at the Frontera barony's initiative and exemplary actions in recent events. Acknowledging their contributions, he issues a royal order, promoting the Frontera barony to a county from the moment the order arrives in the Frontera region. Lloyd Frontera echoes the same sentiments. The royal messenger, in turn, kneels down in front of them and extends congratulations. Erox Frontera and Marbella Frontera become emotional. The royal messenger enumerates the Frontera barony's contributions, highlighting their success in halting the large-scale monster invasion from the east as the first accomplishment. The second contribution is acknowledged for protecting refugees from the eastern region who lost their homes, and the third contribution involves rebuilding the eastern region and transforming it into a fortress. Following these achievements, Frontera County will now gain independence from Cremo County, and Lloyd Frontera will be entrusted with the task of rebuilding the East. Additionally, the imperial family committed to providing the budget and materials required for the East's reconstruction over the next 10 years. Furthermore, Frontera County will be exempted from paying taxes to the imperial family for a period of 20 years. Lloyd Frontera raises his hand to cheer for their empress, declaring the empress's long life and acknowledging her exceptional generosity. He reflects on the almost impossible task of manually constructing a huge city in this era, recognizing that the empress is placing a significant bet on their capability to achieve it. He instructs Javier to accompany him to the village, stating that he has something prepared for this moment. He announces that all territories bordering the east, including the Lacuna Viscounty, will now fall under the administration of Frontera County. As Arcos Frontera watches him leave, he becomes emotional, attributing all the positive changes to him. Not only did he rescue them from their debt, but he also elevated their barony to a county, considering him a miraculous figure. Later, they all gather around the queen's statue, dancing, raising cheers for her, and expressing wishes for her long life to unite the world. Lloyd Frontera encourages them to shout louder so that it reaches Queen Alicia Termina Magentano. They collectively repeat their wishes for her long life. The royal messenger observes the scene. After some time, Lloyd Frontera returns to the palace, kneeling in front of Queen Alicia Termina Magentano. He reports that they have been engaging in the same celebration repeatedly. In response, she becomes angry and instructs them not to continue such activities. Meanwhile, Viscount Lacona races the horse swiftly and reaches the barony. He bows down in front of Erox Frontera and asks if he has called for him. Erox Frontera laughs and mentions there is no need to be so formal, emphasizing that he is still not accustomed to being called a count. Viscount Lacona disagrees, asserting that with his everlasting class and outstanding personality, there is no one better suited to be the count than him. Internally, he reflects on the irony of becoming the count, realizing that he had previously made fun of Erox Frontera for being poor at banquets and even mocked and looked down on him multiple times. Despite this, he accepts the situation. He reflects that he just needs to treat Erox Frontera well from now on, despite considering him an incompetent human who is only good at being kind. He believes that by making use of Erox Frontera's kindness, he can somehow survive this situation. Erox Frontera acknowledges that, as Viscount Lacona already knows, with the royal order received, there is a lot to be done for the reconstruction of the East. He expresses gratitude and reverence for the tasks at hand. Erox Frontera acknowledges the shortage of manpower and proceeds to make a request to Viscount Lacona. He responds by saying that he should tell him whatever he needs. Erox Frontera specifies that he is wondering if Viscount Lacona could provide a few engineers. Viscount Lacona assures him that he can and asks about the required quantity. Erox Frontera, expressing concern that too many engineers might be challenging for him to handle, requests him to send as many engineers as he is willing to. He emphasizes that this should be done to the extent that their friendship won't be negatively affected. Viscount Lacona is shocked to hear this. After some time, Viscount Lacona mounts his horse to depart, but suddenly he falls down. Erox Frontera observes the incident from his window and reflects that he has never bullied or threatened anyone in his life, and he feels a sense of satisfaction. Meanwhile, Bayern approaches Lloyd Frontera and informs him that the admission of residents for Honey Apartment Buildings 101 and 102 has been completed. The system window notifies that he has achieved a monumental construction milestone, having overseen the first construction of apartments and successfully occupied them with residents in the Laurasia continent. The bonus RP is 700, and the total RP is 4,783. Lloyd Frontera contemplates that now that he has sown the seeds, it's time to harvest. After a while, on the apartment side, a lady shares a meal with her child, mentioning that the supplies include meat and soft bread. The child expresses gratitude for the food. Her husband sits nearby, and she encourages him to come quickly. Despite her urging to eat more, he is not consuming the food and reflects on his gratitude. Recalling his past as a hardworking farmer supporting his family, he acknowledges his current state of helplessness and dependence on others. He wonders how long he must continue living as an incompetent person. At that moment, Lloyd Frontera arrives. People cheer for him, expressing gratitude and questioning how they can ever repay him for his actions. Lloyd Frontera reassures them not to worry about that, stating that everything has been good. People express profound gratitude, acknowledging that he saved their lives. An old lady steps forward, holds his hand, and requests him to hold her hand before she dies. He pleads with her not to say that, expressing his hope that she lives longer than him. Hugging a boy, he encourages everyone, stating that they can overcome the challenges. He attributes their current situation to the collective efforts of everyone present and declares his love for them all. Lloyd Frontera inquires if they are enjoying their meal. Observing Lloyd Frontera's actions, Javier senses an ulterior motive in his interactions with the refugees. Two workers set the table and placed contract papers on it. Lloyd Frontera announces that it's time for everyone to repay their debts, revealing that he has the labor contracts ready. He emphasizes that nothing is free forever, eliciting shock from the gathered individuals. Javier grapples with a sense of uncertainty regarding what is right or wrong. A refugee steps forward and asks if signing the contract will secure them a job. Lloyd Frontera assures them that indeed they will receive a salary and overtime pay. However, he clarifies that from the moment they sign the contract and receive their first monthly salary, they will be responsible for purchasing their own food and firewood. He asserts that he doesn't want to live off others and merely rely on goodwill. Therefore, he requests Lloyd Frontera to read the contract to him. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges that the terms will be stringent, explaining that their county follows a rather capitalistic approach. The individual inquires about the meaning of capitalistic. A lady steps forward, asking if women can also sign up. Lloyd Frontera assures her that there is no gender discrimination. More people step forward, forming a queue to sign the contract. Someone inquires about the nature of the work, expressing the desire to work for their own living. Another person pleads for a chance to work. Lloyd Frontera discloses that they are embarking on a project aimed at ensuring stable food production and granting individual ownership of land. After a while, he arrives at the farmland, contemplating the terraced farmland development project. The plan involves cutting off a portion of the eastern mountain and utilizing gabions to construct terraced farmland. He considers that using rebars will make the construction process easier. In another scene, Bangul lies unconscious on the bed, and Bai Bayang, along with others, stands nearby. Reflecting on the situation, he realizes that Bangul has overworked herself with the apartment construction. Bai Bayang becomes angry and delivers a kick to his face. He acknowledges that he can't continue to push Bangul so hard and contemplates potential adjustments. The scene transitions to night, and the system window notifies that the summoning of creature gacha and 1 gacha is equivalent to 150 RP. He has contemplated this for a few days, but it appears that this is the only viable way to obtain the required material. The message box declares, "Alright, here it comes. The gacha is turning, and what will appear?" He acknowledges that one only lives once, proceeds to the start button, and points to it. Despite considering the message as somewhat foolish, resembling the speech of a swindler, he recognizes its consistent support from Pipodong, Homing, and Bangul. He reflects on always receiving creatures he genuinely needs, given his substantial RP count. Hence, there is no need for hesitation. The system notes that the RP currently stands at 4,783. Deciding to move forward, he instructs the summoned creature, crucial for constructing the wire mesh for the retaining wall, to emerge. Clicking on the start button, a portal gate materializes in front of him. Despite finding it noisy, he proceeds with the summoning process. The portal gate undergoes an increase in size, prompting him to inquire about its nature. Suddenly, a substantial amount of fire emanates from it, leading to his frustration. The message box categorizes it as a dud, eliciting an inquiry about whether it is not supportive. The response clarifies that it is merely a messenger conveying fixed rules, emphasizing that the system remains impartial. Expressing dissatisfaction with the abrupt business-like tone, he questions the rationale behind the summoned creatures provided, perfectly tailored to his needs. The message box responds with laughter, deeming him a pitiful fool. It suggests that he remains unaware that gambling involves granting novices some wins and subsequently fostering an expectation for more. In response to the accusation of being a total fraud, he faces the threat of being killed. In a retort, the message box challenges his perception, questioning if he believes the world will make life easy for him. It firmly asserts that life is not to be perceived as easy. He is characterized as someone quick to align with the villain's logic. The message box suggests the possibility of something favorable appearing next. Clicking on the start button, an explosion occurs nearby. The message box intervenes, requesting a moment to be heard, asserting the necessity of attempting things thrice. Undeterred, he clicks on the start button once more, choosing to flee the scene alongside Haming and Pipodong. He questions the wisdom of falling for deception 3 times. Despite his skepticism, the message box contends that he is already being deceived. He lies down, shielding his head, as a colossal creature emerges and advances towards him with hostile intent. Swiftly, he escapes and seeks refuge in Javier's room, where Javier is asleep. Attempting to wake Javier, he responds by going out, attacking, and ultimately dispatching the creature. Lloyd Frontera takes a seat to unwind, and a message box materializes, proclaiming that it was a dud. He acknowledges the message, affirming his awareness of being labeled a lunatic and expressing his decision to abstain from further attempts. The system window informs that the hidden requirement achieved is bankruptcy, and his body and RP have suffered damage due to 3 consecutive duds. To compensate for his losses, he is now afforded the option to select a summoned creature skill. Contemplating the available skills, he ruminates on a list of skill choices. The message box clarifies that the list comprises the skills that can be chosen. However, he is taken aback to observe the skill set, expressing disbelief at the seemingly useless skills presented. As he scrutinizes the screen, he requests a moment to wait for further consideration. He observes a skill associated with spider webs and contemplates the potential advantages of such webs. Considering the thickness comparable to a mesh, he surmises that it would possess more than 3 times the tensile strength and elasticity of steel. Additionally, it would exhibit resilience against humidity and maintain its sturdiness even when exposed to sunlight for prolonged periods. Satisfied with this realization, he smiles, confident that this skill aligns with his objectives. The message box inquires whether he would like to select this skill and proceed with summoning the creature. The required RP stands at 800, and he currently possesses 4070 RP. Confirming his choice to obtain spiderwebs, he proceeds by pressing the Create button. Subsequently, a portal materializes again in front of him, emitting a substantial light that spreads throughout the vicinity. Javier takes a seat, holding his pillow, and remarks that he believes he had a peculiar dream. A worker, noticing his gaze in that direction, inquires about the nature of his observation. Together, they witness something in the sky, causing astonishment as they discern the presence of an angel. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera rides atop Jigoming and proposes a round around the county. The onlookers enthusiastically cheer for him, referring to him as Sir Lloyd. They acknowledge the summoned creature's ability to fly this time, expressing admiration for Sir Lloyd's greatness. Lloyd Frontera, positioned on the angel and clutching his shovel, reflects on his expectation of a spider, but is pleasantly surprised by the appearance of a parrotbill. Despite this, he recognizes the benefits of the creature being a bird. Observers comment on Master Lloyd flying in the skies, asserting their trust in him. Contemplating various strategies, he envisions an extensive self-promotion campaign as a means to enhance the loyalty of his followers significantly. He believes this would subsequently lead to increased work efficiency and substantial tax payments, considering it a jackpot. Providing details about Jigoming's skills, he explains that its primary skill lies in acquiring spider webs. Additionally, it possesses supplementary skills such as spreading spider webs, creating a nest, and executing shit bombardment. Describing the intricacies of the spider web deployment, he notes that Jigoming can release spider webs through its backpack. In an attempt to assess its durability, he applied a mana circle, revealing its remarkable toughness that resulted in only minimal stretching, with the quality deemed perfect. Indicating a direction, he instructs Jigoming to head towards the flat land, intending to create a mesh net using the spider webs. Acknowledging the bird's overall capabilities, he notes its considerable laziness. As Jigoming becomes entangled and teeters on the verge of falling, he questions its destination. Jigoming descends to the ground, causing Lloyd Frontera to lose control and tumble a significant distance away. Expressing frustration, he demands an explanation for Jigoming's actions, to which Jigoming attributes its behavior to excessive laziness. He ponders on how to motivate it to be more productive. The scene shifts to the last night, where Lloyd Frontera sits in proximity to Jigoming. He inquires whether Jigoming knows how to discharge spiderwebs and requests a demonstration of the type of spider web it produces. Lying down, he expresses a lack of concern and questions the purpose of being born for labor and leading a life of toil. Observing this behavior, Lloyd Frontera contemplates the brat's distinct demeanor. Piporong intervenes, advising to construct infrastructure for society, enhance humanity's quality of life, and reap corresponding rewards and satisfaction. He encourages the creation of a personal mindset, becoming an entity that brings happiness to the world. Jigoming, influenced by Piporong's words, expresses a willingness to try. Lloyd Frontera reflects that Piporong's words had a motivating effect, leading to some movement. Yet he finds himself in a similar state once again. Piporong suggests attempting to do a little more together, prompting Jigoming to reflect on his reluctance to exert excessive effort. He questions the necessity of intense labor, contending that the world will progress on its own without their active involvement. Asserting that he summoned Jigoming, he expresses assurance in providing sustenance and care. Lloyd Frontera, feeling increasingly agitated, contemplates the idea of cooking Jigoming. Disapproving of such thoughts, Piporong intervenes, leading to Jigoming striking him on the head with a tree stick. Despite the incident, Lloyd Frontera acquiesces, acknowledging with a resigned "sure, all right," and offers an almond to Piporong. After a while, Piporong undergoes a transformation, growing in size. Attempting to flee, Jigoming's leg is caught by the enlarged Piporong, who seizes him and endeavors to put him into his mouth. Lloyd Frontera, witnessing this action, is shocked. Piporong places Jigoming in his mouth, later expelling him and inquiring about the experience, expressing a desire to continue playing. Surprising them, Jigoming states his desire to work. Both Piporong and Lloyd Frontera respond with a strange expression. Reflecting on the situation, Lloyd Frontera concludes that punishment is effective regardless of time or place. He outlines the plan, with Step 1 involving digging and forming a slope, Step 2 employing Bai Bayang to use a giant sieve to filter out fine sand, and Step 3 requiring Jigoming to lay out spider webs in a mesh formation after the sand has been filtered. Piporong comments on Jigoming's perceived weakness, leading Lloyd Frontera to emphasize Step 4, encouragement from the one in charge. He instructs the white cavalry to move in, and they all proceed, each holding shovels. Lloyd Frontera proceeds with Step 5, directing the utilization of sand to cover the spider web mesh, iterating the process until the backfilling is completed. Moving on to Step 6, he emphasizes the need to make the backfilled structure sturdy, fill it on all sides, and pour boulders and gravel into the gabion meticulously. Riding on Jigoming's back to inspect the progress, he notes the completion of the first section and anticipates finishing the entire project before spring arrives. Contemplating the distribution of the construction materials to refugees and expediting apartment construction, he envisions completing everything by the following year, bringing an end to his life of labor. He envisions the prospect of a super-rich, unemployed life awaiting him. Simultaneously, the all-white cavalry utilizes their shovels to dig while Erox, Frontera, and Bayron draft the contract paper. The system window announces the completion of Frontera County's terraced farmland construction, proclaiming Lloyd Frontera to be one of the best civil engineers on the continent. This accomplishment earns him a bonus RP of plus 800, bringing his total RP to 470. Lying on the grass and holding flowers, Lloyd Frontera receives notification of his new title as the leader of those who are tired. The workers also express their happiness, and the system window reveals that the title's region is Frontery Country. Its active period spans 30 years, and it grants 3 CPS. The title's effect will be applied to the designated region for 24 hours, with the potential for an extension, reduction, or change in the time limit based on his actions or those of the region. The title further notes that the effects include a 300% increase in the northern mountain terraced farmland's chance of getting a great harvest and a 200% increase in the harvest amount. Engaging in a solitary game of chase, he observes that it has become slightly more challenging. Contemplating his next move, he ponders over a dice, expressing uncertainty about what to do. In frustration, he exclaims that the situation is driving him crazy. Javier inquires if he finds it enjoyable, to which he enthusiastically responds affirmatively, stating that it's the best, and he loves the thrill of it. He adds that anything other than working is preferable. Javier notes that it's the first time she has seen him play since that day. He questions what else he has on his agenda. He reassures her that Sir Bayron will effectively manage the construction process independently. Reflecting on recent developments, he mentions increasing the soldiers' wages, leading to heightened enthusiasm and smooth progress in their work. The narrative transitions to a real-world life flashback, where his father imparts a valuable lesson. His father emphasizes the importance of remembering that when everything appears to be going well, one should take a moment to scrutinize and question the situation. Lloyd Frontera is reminded to consider whether everything is genuinely okay at least once and to make a conscious effort to do so. Returning to the present, Lloyd Frontera advises Javier to stay up late tonight, as he has some tasks to attend to before singing a lullaby. Javier inquires about his late-night intentions. Lloyd Frontera explains that he needs to verify if everything is truly okay. The system window then notifies that the ending spoiler entails using his CP to preview the concluding scene for this storyline. The required CP for the second use is 40, and it queries whether he would like to use the ending spoiler. Contemplating the cost of becoming a wealthy unemployed individual, Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the necessity of securing a safe future without stumbling blocks. Confirming his decision, he presses the yes button. Lloyd Frontera finds himself transported into the future within a black space. Upon entering a room, he surveys the surroundings, contemplating whether it is his room. In the same space, he observes a future version of himself lying on the bed while Javier performs magic on him. Pondering the nature of Javier's actions, he questions whether it involves massaging his meridian. Witnessing his mana power light up, he becomes alarmed at the intense circulation and expresses concern that his heart might burst. He attempts to communicate with Javier, questioning the purpose of these actions and whether Javier can hear him. Javier continues his magical gestures, placing hands on Lloyd Frontera's chest, but the latter lies on the bed, unconscious and motionless. Lloyd Frontera reflects on his appearance and contemplates an alternate ending where he meets his demise. The future Lloyd Frontera eventually opens his eyes, calling out to Javier, urging him to stop, asserting that he already knows the futility of his efforts, and instructing him to let him live on and endure. In response, Javier starts to tears. Contemplating the instruction to burn what, Lloyd Frontera expresses confusion. Javier takes his hand and reveals that he is not the Count. Javier asserts that he is a hero who safeguarded his second hometown and rescued numerous refugees, intending to present himself to the world in such a manner. The future Lloyd Frontera breathes heavily and succumbs to death. Iparang, Bangol, Haming and Jigoming cry and subsequently vanish. Shocked by the revelation of his demise, Lloyd Frontera strives to remain composed, urging himself not to panic and to analyze the situation. He reflects on the minimal change in Javier's appearance, deducing that this event is in the near future. Observing that he appears significantly thinner, potentially due to dehydration, he questions the reason behind it. Javier supports him, leading him out of the palace. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the timing of the event, surmising that it occurs in the spring. Witnessing numerous lifeless bodies on the floor, he is shocked and contemplates a massacre, excluding Javier. Observing Javier spreading oil on the bodies and subsequently using a fire stick to burn them, he realizes that he was referring to burning the corpses. In light of this, he speculates that it might be an epidemic. Pondering the possibility of an illness causing this, he acknowledges his lack of knowledge about diseases, acknowledging that he is not a doctor from the other world. Doubting his ability to halt the situation, he wonders if there is anything he can do. Javier addresses him as Master Lloyd, then corrects himself, stating that whoever he is, these were his last words. He expresses the desire that, once his corpse has been completely burned, he wants him to remember the word empty. Lloyd Frontera returns to the present, contemplating the cryptic message, remembered as empty, and questioning the nature of those last words. Pondering why such a cryptic message was delivered, he has a realization. Considering that Lloyd, who just perished, had already experienced the ending spoiler before, he wonders if the message was intended for him as the observer. This leads him to speculate that it might be a hint from Lloyd, who knew about the illness and its resolution. Walking around, he continues to mull over the concepts of empty, epidemic, and the significant number of casualties. Connecting the puzzle pieces in his mind, he concludes that the future version of himself was indeed a genius for leaving such a hint. After a while, Sir Bayern inquires if Lloyd Frontera is referring to the people from Cremo. Confirming this, Lloyd Frontera affirms that he indeed needs as many professional corpsmen as possible. Sir Bayern raises concerns about potentially high labor costs. In response, Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the challenge, but asserts that Count Cremo will need to provide them. He explains that the people of Cremo are occupied with cultivating their own lands, and both the soldiers and orcs are engaged in apartment construction. The system notifies that title effects are crucial for debt reduction, and Lloyd Frontera has attained the highest level of financial credibility. This achievement allows him to secure investment funds with the least amount of interest and the most favorable conditions. Contemplating the advantages conferred by the title, he acknowledges that, thanks to it, there should not be any major problems, but the thought of being in debt again stings. Bayern inquires about the scale of the construction project he is envisioning. Lloyd Frontera responds, suggesting it might be as extensive as the Honey Apartments, covering the entire Viscounty. He reflects on the formidable foe he faces an epidemic, specifically cholera. Elaborating on the project, he mentions the need for underground tunnels in various directions. Acknowledging his limited medical knowledge, he emphasizes that medical expertise isn't the sole means to combat illnesses. Asserting the necessity for paths for waste disposal, he declares their intention to construct sewers. Reflecting on the cryptic message, "Remember empty," he realizes it was referring to Vienna in Austria. Explaining the historical context of Vienna, Lloyd Frontera details how the city's population experienced an exponential increase during the Industrial Revolution. However, during that period, Vienna lacked proper sewers, leading to the disposal of urine and feces from numerous individuals directly into the Danube River. Typically, such waste would flow with the river, decomposing naturally due to microorganisms. Unfortunately, a sudden cold spell struck the river, resulting in a significant disaster. Lloyd Frontera describes the adverse impact caused by the freezing of the river. The waste, unable to flow freely, alternated between melting and freezing, ultimately leading to rot and polluting the underground water. This environmental degradation was a significant factor in the outbreak of cholera in Vienna. Lloyd Frontera stands on a high mountain, holding his shovel. He surveys the town below and contemplates an exponentially increasing population and the waste that is supposed to be disposed of in the prone river. He contemplates the potential consequences if there is a sudden cold snap that freezes the river sometime this year or the next. He believes their Viscounty will undoubtedly become another Vienna. Grabbing his hair, he solemnly remarks that he always gets more work when things start to relax a little, but he must wait. He reflects on the fact that even if it were a demon and not a sickness that came for them, he would not let anyone or anything thwart his dream of enjoying life. He thinks this even as he sleeps in his bed, confident that not even a demon can hinder his dream. However, he acknowledges that another substantial debt is in the way of that dream. He wishes it were only the salaries of the external laborers that he needed to pay, but when he includes the cost of their accommodations and the expenses related to sending them out to work, it becomes apparent that it is more complex. Holding his collar, he reflects on the corrosive nature of other people's money, the toxin known as other people's money that is consuming him entirely. After a while, an orc warrior observes Emily with Officer Greg, who mentions that he plucked a flower because it looked pretty, but it pales in comparison when put beside her. She laughs and playfully comments on his naughtiness. He recalls the night she arrived in their Viscounty, expressing how he discovered that his heart could become even warmer than the bright and radiant sun in the skies. She laughs again, teasing him for being funny and cringe. He asserts that it would take more than a slap or two to deter him. The orc warrior, still observing them happily together, becomes angry. Another soldier approaches from behind, informing Officer Greg that Sir Bayern is looking for him. Greg acknowledges this, telling the soldier to inform Bayern that he's on his way. Before leaving, he grabs Emily's hand and affectionately calls her his flower-like girl, mentioning that he's heading off to work. She responds, urging him to come back quickly, referring to him as her handsome boy. Officer Greg walks towards Sir Bayern's camp, and an orc warrior calls him from behind, questioning how he could do that. Confused, Officer Greg asks for pardon and inquires about what the orc warrior means. The orc warrior shouts, expressing disbelief at how Officer Greg could do such a thing when he already has Emily. Officer Greg, still puzzled, asks what he is talking about and questions the involvement of someone like Emily. The orc warrior, angered, abuses him and attempts to punch him. However, Officer Greg quickly counterattacks, landing a punch and throwing him away. Officer Greg asserts that a half-assed punch isn't enough to injure him. The orc warrior acknowledges this, recognizing that Frontera Viscounty soldiers are now capable of controlling the power of mana after numerous hours spent in labor work and training. He reflects on how each one of them is strong enough to take on 10 enemies by themselves, but their strength has mainly been used in laborious tasks like shoveling. They both prepare for a fight, running to attack each other. Bayern arrives and addresses Officer Greg, noting that he's too slow and questioning why he is still there despite being summoned a while back. He wonders if Officer Greg is fooling around while trying to earn his salary. Officer Greg apologizes and follows behind Bayern, with the orc warrior also trailing them. Bayern mentions that he's going on a work trip and instructs Officer Greg to start packing his luggage. He mobilizes him, expressing trust in him, and questions how he could mess up before even departing. Angered, Officer Greg looks at the orc warrior. Bayern emphasizes that additional work hours are named so because one is supposed to work during those hours. He adds that he doesn't care about what happens outside those hours. The orc warrior walks away, and Officer Greg continues to follow Bayern as they reach the stables to prepare his horse. Officer Greg inquires if they are going all the way to Cremo just to call for reinforcements. Bayern agrees and mentions that Master Lloyd said he is planning a large-scale project that will have life and death implications. In response, he states that he doesn't believe there is a need to undertake such a project. The system notifies him that the achievements and compliments he has accumulated are producing a combined effect. Lloyd Frontera sits in his room, observing this notification, and inquires about the nature of this effect. The system informs him that he has punished the traitor of the Viscounty, paid off his debts, and provided a home for the refugees without turning them away. Soldiers walk outside his house, and the system once again notifies him that he faced a significant disaster head-on, emerged victorious, and ensured the safety of citizens and refugees within the Viscounty. The system expresses a desire to repay him for the help he has given them. Lloyd Frontera questions the kind of help and how they plan to repay it. The system explains the combined title effects, activated by people who wish to repay his help. Meanwhile, he hears some voices, looks behind, and stands up to gaze out of the window. He observes people outside saying, "Master Lloyd, please give them work. They'll do anything for him." He responds, assuring them that it's okay even if he doesn't provide salaries, and requests them to help him. They express willingness to work for free, solely for Master Lloyd. They declare their dedication to working for him. In response, he shouts for them to be quiet and shares his perspective, stating that the hardest thing to trust is when people do something for the sake of others. He adds that it's easier to trust when someone is acting for their own benefit. He questions those who claim they don't want salaries, emphasizing that he never gave them anything for free. He asks if they even dream of working without payment. He declares his intention to write up a contract and becomes emotional. The scene shifts to Samarkand, where a pigeon delivers a message to Sultan Samar Khan. He takes the message, reads it, and remarks that the scouts they sent west have reported the following about the village overturned by the monster Domino. The message describes a bizarre bird that splits the heavens, a beast that destroys the earth, a creature capable of swallowing the sea, a snake that devours mountains, and finally, a monster whose roars resonate in the skies. These creatures are all being raised there. The message further details that the workers of the village defeated orcs with their bare hands, and their elderly clerks moved faster than the winds. Additionally, it mentions that even the powerful white cavalry has started wielding shovels instead of spears. Both the elves and orcs are using their strength to construct buildings. He reads that if their non-combatants are this strong, then he can't even begin to imagine how powerful their combatants might be. As he reads the message, he contemplates what is going on in that place. Diego sits on a stone while two soldiers are practicing nearby. He becomes angry, addressing them as lowly individuals, questioning if their lowly minds prevent them from understanding his words. He shouts that they need to put all their strength into their punches and demonstrates with his own. He asks why they are stopping, questioning if they are out of their minds, and if they want to see their wives and children starve to death. One of the soldiers punches the other with full force, causing him to bleed, and Diego laughs, saying that's more like it. Lloyd Frontera expresses his approval, and Diego is startled because of him. Diego replies that he always acts scared when he sees Lloyd and finds it embarrassing. Lloyd looks at the two soldiers practicing and inquires about their identities. Diego responds that they are the lowly servants of his house. Lloyd Frontera remarks that having a hierarchy is great, allowing him to have this kind of fun too. Diego, feeling uneasy, says pardon. Lloyd smiles and expresses his desire to join in and give it a try. Diego rejects the idea, stating that he cannot let him fight like them. Lloyd Frontera questions this, expressing frustration and stating that he is asking Diego to fight, but Diego is not willing. Diego becomes scared but reluctantly agrees, mentioning the red corner and the blue corner. Lloyd Frontera points towards Javier and designates him as the opponent. Javier, acknowledging it as a count's order, accepts the challenge. Diego tries to intervene, asking them to wait and to sheathe their swords. Lloyd Frontera questions why Diego is asking him to stop, suggesting that Diego can grab a sword too, if he feels it's unfair. Diego responds, stating that the sword isn't the problem, and pleads for Lloyd Frontera to let him go. He bows and cries, but Lloyd dismisses his plea, commenting that a sword master is overdoing things. Lloyd suggests fighting and laughs, then proceeds to punch and throw Diego away. He presents a document, mentioning that it's a request for his return to school, instructing Diego to write down the events that occurred today. Diego pleads with him not to write that and questions why Lloyd keeps asking people not to do things. In frustration, Diego asserts his status as the son of a count and resorts to abusive language. A pigeon arrives with Peepodong sitting on it, and Lloyd Frontera notices a document with them. As Lloyd walks away, he instructs the two soldiers to relax and go to Frontera to find Sir Bayern. He informs them that they are residents of that place from today onwards, urging them to work hard. After a while, Viscount Lacona rises from his bed, reflecting on the annoyance of that recurring guy appearing in his dream, making for an irritating start to the day. There's a knock on his door, and someone outside states they have something urgent to tell him. The Viscount, irritated, questions who the impertinent person is daring to knock on his room's door and orders them to leave immediately. The person insists it's urgent and needs immediate attention. Viscount Lacona, angered, grabs his hunter and threatens the individual, asking how a lowlife like them dares to talk back, and if they have forgotten the feel of a whip. He opens the door to find Lloyd Frontera standing there, who greets him with a cheerful, long time no see. The shock causes Viscount to fall down and faint. He, seemingly unfazed, asks Javier if his face is that appalling. Javier responds that it's not the kind that people would feel at ease around. He takes Viscount Lacona outside and points in a direction, informing him that his land starts from over there. He adds that he's going to flatten it all out to build a quarry and instructs the Viscount to take note of that. The Viscount responds, questioning why Lloyd Frontera is suddenly doing this. Annoyed, he asks why Lloyd is acting in such a manner and wonders if they need to spell everything out between them. The Viscount considers that using granite instead of cement for the construction of the sewage routes would be better, as it won't break or destabilize in the far future. Lloyd Frontera agrees and declares it's time to begin constructing a highway that leads from the quarry to their county. He emphasizes that it will be one straight path pointing towards Lacona Mansion. One of the soldiers notes an obstruction right from the start, mentioning that it's one straight path as they destroy the palace to create a direct route. The Viscount is shocked to see this, but Lloyd Frontera reassures him, saying they'll build him another house to live in. Lloyd Frontera adds that they will relocate the workers to his mansion and provide one person to assist with his errands. After a while, he guides them to his camps, where he imprisons them in a tent and assigns an orc warrior to look after them while they both shiver. The orc warrior inquires if they need anything, but they refuse. He reflects that the Apia Highway used to transport granite, and the supervision of the quarry construction will be handled by Sir Bayern. He acknowledges that he has surpassed the level of a veteran and reached the level of a maestro. The system notifies him of his levels: design understanding at level 85, design execution at level 90, administration tasks at level 99, and manpower management also at level 99. Bai Bayong consumes numerous trees while contemplating that there was no need to worry about flattening out the mountains for the construction of the quarry. He reasons that there are plenty of monsters in their county who excel at labor work. He observes that the elves are overseeing the apartment construction, relying on their exceptional perception and incredible physical strength, while the people encourage each other. Bai Bayong identifies a potential issue in dealing with the sludge and considers having engineers dig it up with shovels. However, he dismisses the idea, deeming it implausible as they would suffocate from the poisonous gases. He concludes that the best solution would be to incinerate it all with intense heat, akin to how modern technology accomplishes it. He speculates that Javier himself or Bangol could handle that task. He contemplates the craziness of the situation, pondering what might be inside and how they could continue doing that every day. He wonders where he can find a slave familiar with using heat and able to work in the sewers daily, holding his head in thought. After a moment, he gets an idea and exclaims, "Wait, he does know a slave like that." On the other side, Corgetus and his team work on making iron rods. Lloyd Frontera and Javier arrive, and Corgidus inquires if he wants him to make armor out of the Alencia tree sap. He questions the need for such armor, asking if they are planning to capture a dragon or something. Lloyd confirms this, pointing towards Javier and stating that he is the one doing it, while Javier looks at him annoyingly. Somewhere deep in the eastern mountain ranges, a dragon sits in a cave and exclaims, "Damn it," he quits. He reflects on the numerous gemstones around him and wonders why he can't refine any. Expressing frustration, he thinks about wanting to get married but laments his perceived lack of skill with his hands, looking at them in disappointment. He considers these cursed hands and believes that he needs to craft something beautiful and delicious to feed his hatchlings, as only then will he be acknowledged as a competent male dragon. He acknowledges his proficiency in crushing things, but acknowledges that this is what female dragons hate the most. Reflecting on the past, he thinks making jewels wasn't this difficult. It used to be as simple as plundering human castles and kidnapping dwarves to do the work for him. He holds a gemstone, using his powers to break and shatter it. Despite this, he thinks that one day, the being known as the Dragon King will marry a human girl and declare the dragon's commandments. He contemplates that all dragons are prohibited from plundering and threatening other races, and they are required to go to a vein of ore and craft their own jewels. Expressing frustration, he criticizes these tyrants for imposing such a rule after accumulating tons of jewels through plundering and threatening. He questions how they dare to act kindly and requests the younger generation to engage in such activities, urging them to grow old quickly and die. Lloyd Frontera and Javier arrive, and he mentions that he can totally empathize with those feelings. The dragon looks at him surprisingly. Lloyd Frontera states that he has seen a lot of the older generation speculating in stocks and earning tons of money, only to then tell the younger generation that speculation is bad. This infuriates the dragon, who questions how a human could come here and asks if he managed to get past the traps he set up. He responds affirmatively, expressing a desire to speak with a great dragon like himself. He informs the dragon Solidas that they temporarily deactivated the traps and proceeds to share a proposal with him. However, the dragon becomes angry, exclaiming "Die," and throws fire on both of them. He declares that he can't get married because of humans, and they should die. Quickly, they close their armor, covering their eyes as well, and he remarks that he knows he won't be able to control his temper. Javier asks about the plan, and he replies, questioning when he has already told him. Javier denies hearing anything of the sort. The dragon continues to throw fire on them as they hide behind a rock. He declares his intention to defeat the dragon. Javier clarifies that defeating the dragon is the end result, not the plan. He urges him to stop joking around and tell him what he needs to do. Javier states that he followed him all the way here because he trusted his plans. He responds, outlining Step 1. He fights, and in Step 2, he defeats the dragon, tapping on the rock for emphasis. Javier wonders if, despite taking his dragon breath, there is some special power in that seemingly stupid-looking armor of his. The dragon expresses frustration and decides to crush them with brute strength. Lloyd Frontera assures that he can do it, while Javier seriously prepares to fight the dragon. The dragon attacks him, pushing him back. Javier also readies himself to attack the dragon, who becomes increasingly angry and roars. Javier looks at him, realizing that he can actually do it, and runs to attack while Lloyd Frontera hides behind the rock. He reflects that it's to be expected since he had a hard time in the novel, with Javier ultimately winning. Javier's strength in the novel is just at the level of a newly awakened sword master. Javier continues to fight with the dragon and tries to defeat him. He reflects that he was just a little stronger than the Empress and Kyle, but now he's even stronger than the average sword master. He believes he's a high sword master and that there's no way he'd get hit by the young and weak Solidas. Javier utilizes all his skills to combat the dragon. The dragon ponders, questioning what just happened, as a human seems to have jumped in the air. The dragon jumps high to attack him. Javier thinks it's nice, as with this, he can use the blast to move faster in the air. He attacks the dragon quickly from all sides. Lloyd Frontera observes all this and thinks about whether Javier used what he learned from the elves' footwork to create a mana foothold in the air. He reflects on how a protagonist can really do everything. Javier reaches toward the dragon's head, contemplating that even if it's a young dragon, it remains the strongest species on Earth, and he won't be able to damage it so easily. He utilizes his mana blast power to attack it. Then, employing his aura blast, he throws something with a bright flash toward the dragon. It stabs at the dragon's chest, and waves emanate from the point of impact. The dragon shouts in pain. Javier confidently challenges it, showing his sword. The dragon, in response, asks him to wait a minute. Observing this, Lloyd Frontera wonders how a dragon can be so scared of a human. He speculates that this is what Solitas looks like when she's scared. Lloyd Frontera enters a flashback where he wakes up in his room and a beetle approaches, asking him if he wants to die. Reflecting on the moment, he recalls someone sleeping in the room when a beetle suddenly appeared, attempting to provoke a fight. He responds by using insecticide against it. However, the beetle smiles and begins flying around. The final blow occurs when he grabs a bee catcher to eliminate the beetle. The beetle, now holding a pen, swiftly approaches and stabs his chest with the pen tip, prompting him to shout. Reflecting on the painful experience, he notes that anyone would go crazy facing such a menacing organism charging at them. Returning to the present, he thinks about the kind of menacing existence that Javier represents in Solitas' eyes as Javier prepares to fight the dragon. Observing Javier as he falls, the dragon addresses him, requesting a moment to convey something important. Javier stops, but the dragon abruptly attacks him with force. To their surprise, Javier is not where the attack lands. Seizing the opportunity, Javier reappears from behind, launching an assault with aura mana. He pokes the dragon's back and different parts of its body, causing the dragon to scream in pain while pleading for the attacks to cease. Seeing the events, Lloyd Frontera thinks things are progressing as planned, anticipating Lord Solitas' next move. The dragon retaliates by using smoke breath on them. Lloyd Frontera then recalls a flashback where beetles attacked him from all sides, prompting him to contemplate the inefficacy of insecticide. As the beetles' relentless attacks continue, he runs out of his room and out of his house. Returning to the present in the cave, Lord Solitas arrives, prompting Lloyd Frontera to think he can't find him. Placing 2 fingers at his head, Lloyd Frontera contemplates teleporting during an impending fire attack, and he subsequently falls. Lord Solitas reflects that he set up a teleport detection trap, acknowledging his past foolishness while realizing he is an even bigger fool today. Meanwhile, as Lloyd Frontera approaches him with a smile, he expresses a desire to reintroduce himself as Mighty Dragon Solitas while bowing. Lloyd Frontera states that he is Count Frontera's eldest son. Lord Solitas gets up, questions the situation, denies being a dragon, and asks where he is and why he is there, expressing a strong desire to leave quickly. Javier launches an attack from behind, causing Lord Solitas to shout and fall. He questions the identity of the assailants and the reasons behind their actions. Lloyd Frontera remarks on the expected reaction of a mighty dragon, noting that people typically don't shout Kaya when struck. He expresses a desire to hear the reason behind Lord Solitas' reaction, reiterating that they are present to propose a favorable idea. Despite this, Lord Solitas insists that they should refrain from talking and question why he was attacked. Lloyd Frontera's servant, surprised by Lord Solitas' attempt to kill them, instinctively counterattacks and laughs. In response, Lord Solitas asks what Lloyd Frontera has in mind. Lloyd Frontera, pleased with the current state of affairs, reflects on the foundations they have established. Drawing inspiration from a novel where Solitas displays anger issues while ambushing elves, Lloyd Frontera considers the need for a potent approach when dealing with such a dragon. In a flashback, Lord Solitas recalls an incident involving a furious man overturning a food table and expressing dissatisfaction with the darkness of Jajangmyeon. This memory serves as an example of how most races express anger. The boss arrives on the scene, confirming his status, and addresses the man's complaint about the dish's color. The man demands a new one, but the boss asserts that he doesn't like it and instructs him to make a new dish. Despite the initial resistance, the man eventually relents, declaring the dish delicious and refusing to let others eat it. Lord Solitas reflects that anger can be subdued when individuals face someone stronger than themselves. Although he has successfully calmed down, he acknowledges the challenge of negotiating with a dragon whose pride has been wounded by defeat at the hands of a mere human. In response, Lloyd Frontera, displaying audacity, berates Lord Solitas, questioning how he dared swing his sword at the mighty dragon. Lloyd Frontera continues to insult him, labeling him a lowly bastard. Expressing his frustration, Lloyd Frontera exclaims that Lord Solitas should be grateful for being a very magnanimous dragon. Otherwise, they would have been roasted alive by now. He instructs Lord Solitas, whom he refers to as a lowly bastard, to go all the way over, kneel down, and raise his hands to repent, Reiterating his command, he shouts again, questioning if Lord Solidas is deaf and demanding that he move to the specified location immediately. Subsequently, Lloyd Frontera takes a seat and politely invites Lord Solidas to join him, saying, "Lord Solidas, please have a seat over here." Lord Solidas takes a seat and Lloyd Frontera positions himself on his knees in front of him, expressing a desire to ask a question. Lord Solidas replies, asking about the nature of the inquiry. Lloyd Frontera straightforwardly inquires if Lord Solidas wishes to get married. Surprised by this revelation, Lord Solidas questions how Lloyd Frontera is privy to such details, including the difficulty in refining jewels properly, eliciting shock from Javier. Puzzled, Lord Solidas wonders how Lloyd Frontera discovered his den in the first place. Lloyd Frontera reassures him that he will arrange his marriage within 10 years. Lord Solidas becomes excited, asking if it will truly happen, and insists on receiving an answer to his initial question. Lloyd Frontera, rather diverted, reiterates his excitement about a sweet love with a female dragon. Lord Solidas, now eager, emphasizes his anticipation but persists in seeking an answer to his original question. Lloyd Frontera responds by describing romantic gestures, urging them to hold front legs tightly, traverse around the Arctic, utilize telepathy for sweet love letters, and form a heart shape with their tails under a star-filled night sky. He wonders if Lord Solidas can feel the love and blushes in response. Lord Solidas informs him that all he needs to do is sign the document, and he'll arrange the marriage. Handing him a pen and a contract letter, he instructs him to sign and prepare for the wedding. The person responds affirmatively, stating that he only needs to sign at the very end. Lord Solidas points to the designated spot on the letter and inquires where he needs to sign. As he begins to sign, Lloyd Frontera swiftly takes the letter away, expressing concern that there might be something in the Dragon Commandments stipulating consequences for a dragon breaking a contract with humans, possibly facing the wrath of the Dragon King's breath. He suspects that Solidas might have realized the implications and unwittingly made a deal with the devil. On the other side, in the village, a villager remarks to another to look over there as Master Lloyd is returning from his work trip. Lloyd Frontera, Javier, and Lord Solidas walk towards his home. The villager comments that Master Lloyd always brings something crazy with him when he returns, and this time he thinks it might be a dragon, but it seems to be a shabby-looking young man. Another villager adds, "Come on, how could he catch a dragon?" They both laugh, agreeing with each other. Lloyd Frontera overhears the conversation and reflects on the fact that it's not just his dung incinerator, but also the dragon he acquired. Corgidus inquires of the young man whether he is a dragon, to which Lloyd Frontera affirms, stating that the evidence lies in the smoke emanating from his Braidun breath. Lord Solidas expresses his displeasure, referring to Corgidus as a darn con artist. Corgidus questions Solidas about his purported lack of skill in handicrafts, and upon confirmation, Lloyd Frontera explains that, as per the contract, Corgidus is tasked with teaching Solidas how to craft jewels. Additionally, he instructs Solidas to incinerate all the sludge within the excretion facilities daily. Solidas, considering himself a dragon, questions the rationale behind cleaning human feces. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the difficulty Solidas may have in accepting this responsibility and wonders if he can read minds. Lloyd Frontera explains that he applied some pressure to induce him to sign the contract. Otherwise, he would not have agreed, missing the opportunity to learn jewel crafting, which could complicate his prospects for marriage. He chuckles and emphasizes the importance of prioritizing practicality over pride in such matters. Solidas acknowledges Corgidus as his teacher, referring to him as a dwarf, and respectfully bows. Corgidus expresses surprise that a humble dwarf like himself would instruct a powerful dragon. In response, Solidas acknowledges the dragon's strength, but emphasizes his own prowess in craftsmanship, pleading for assistance in improving his cursed hands. Lloyd Frontera reflects on Solidas's adaptability despite any perceived foolishness, recognizing that he is indeed a dragon. Corgidus remarks that if Solidas is expressing agreement, then he cannot possibly refuse, even though he might be a bit tough on him. He wonders if Solidas will manage to handle it. Solidas assures Corgidus that he is prepared, prompting Corgidus to instruct him to stop standing around and bring the necessary materials. Taken aback emotionally, Solidas asks if Corgidus is addressing him. Corgidus questions whether Solidas expects his teacher to do everything for him and urges him to get moving immediately. Solidas runs off, stating that he will do it now. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the positive outcome of the contract, noting that everyone benefits, and Salidas exchanges his pride for the highest level of education in the world. Corgidus, warning against putting too much strength into his actions, rebukes Salidas by hitting his hand with a stick. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the unusual experience of witnessing a dragon being subjected to abuse by Corgidus, who has encountered numerous disadvantageous contracts throughout his life. He contemplates that others probably perceived him as having no choice in the matter. Corgidus once again strikes Salidas and questions whether he is attempting to destroy everything, advising him to consider his actions beforehand. He asserts that acts of violence are not a means of making contracts. True contracts result in mutual benefit for all parties involved, especially as he observes them. Corgidus instructs Salidas to discard the jewels, deeming them as damaged, and questions whether he plans to turn everything into trash. As Salidas tosses all the jewels onto the floor, Corgidus thinks it would be more advantageous to gather the jewels discreetly and profit from them. The system notifies him that he has transformed another tragic fate into a positive outcome. It mentions that the fire dragon Salidas lost his horns in a battle against Javier, suffering fatal injuries before returning to his den, where he met his demise. The system further notifies him that Salidas dies alone in his undiscovered den, turning a tragic fate into a positive one. Meanwhile, he inquires if that's the case, but the novel only depicts him fleeing from his den.